there. I thought I would put together some videos of how I teach some of the exercises that we cover in our Focus Puppy and Elementary Manners classes, just so people have some examples. So I thought one of the exercises I would show is the approach to teaching dogs to leave stuff alone. I don't really call it leave it cue in the beginning because in the beginning it's not so much a cue as it is a puzzle I want the dogs to figure out. I want the dogs to realize that there's some benefit to not mugging our hands, to trying to get at things, to offering instead to leave these things alone. Reduces my need to micromanage or nag the dogs in the future. So when I start this exercise, especially with puppies, I'll put the little treat in my hand and fold fingertips and thumb in to reduce the chances of them nibbling on it. Then what I will do is I will place the food within reach of the dog, and as soon as the dog moves their nose away from the food, I will use my marker word and then reward them. So in this case, I'll put it right here. Yes, give them the treat. Now, sometimes I want my dogs to learn to look at me instead of focusing on the food. So in that case, I'll just wait a little bit longer. Yes, and once I see his eyes looking at me, then he can have the treat. Yes. So it takes a little bit of time. The first few times you do it with a puppy that has never played this game, they usually don't realize that once they can't initially get the treat, that they can get it as long as they move away. So when they do move away, it's like they completely abandon any idea of getting the treat. So you need to do it a few times. You need to still mark and reward them, give them that treat the first few times so that they realize they don't really have to abandon all hope and leave entirely. They just need to move back a little bit. So once the dog has figured this part out, we can move on from there, and there are various variations of ways that you can do this. One of the next things I'll usually do in the class is look at getting the food on the ground. So here it's very much in my possession. It's very clear that it's mine. Once it gets on the floor, a little less so. So what I'll do is still within reach of the dog without controlling the dog. I take the food and I put it under my shoe. Yes. And at this point, I do my marker word and then I reward with a treat from my hand rather than the one on the ground, because some dogs will fixate on the one on the ground, and if we're planning to use this for leave the garbage on the side of the road alone, I don't want them fixedly staring, just waiting for me to tell them that it's all right for them to go and grab that piece of garbage, because that's not happening, and what I really want to do is move on with my walk. So we do this a few times so that the puppies understand that piece of the ground is not for them. And this is condensed because he already knows this game. This is not going to happen all in one session. So you just go with the speed that your puppy or dog understands this game. I just wanted to be able to show you the different steps. Once they get the idea they're leaving it alone under your shoe readily, or maybe not even going for it at all, which is absolutely fine, I want to introduce the idea that it could be uncovered, it could be visible to the dog. So I'm going to start the same way. Put it underneath my shoe. Dog's looking at me. I'm going to move my shoe. Yes. I'm going to reward the dog. I'm going to cover that back up. You saw him look. So when most dogs are new to this game, they will eat the reward treat and they will immediately try and eat the other treat. It's like, I eat one treat, all treats are for me. I'm not really sure what they think of that, but it's very, very common for them to eat one and immediately try and eat the other. That's why I just say just cover it back up again. So you do this a few times. So that they get the idea that it can be uncovered and still not for them. Now, you'll also notice that when I uncover it, he doesn't look at it. Part of it is because I'm looking at him, so he just stays looking at me. But his peripheral vision is really good. Plus, he can hear my foot moving, so he knows something has happened over there, that area of the treat. He has not forgotten that the treat is there. This is a common thing I hear. Oh, my dog doesn't know it's there. And then if the person waits too long, usually the time they've called me over, I'm boring you today, the dog snags the treat. So they are capable of going for quite a while without making moves toward it. If you're not sure, just pick up the treat and show it to them and put it back down again. Yes. Okay. I'd much rather people do that than point at it. It gets confusing for the dog. Can I have the treat? Can I not have the treat? If you are sometimes going to allow your dog to have the treat, you want a very clear definition of when they can and when they can't, or else they get confused, and that's when you give your permission, the dog's kind of frozen there, like, can I or can't I? So they get the introduction that it can be visible and still not for them. Then I'll move on to setting it beside my foot to start. Yes. So if he were to move toward it, then I could just cover it up again, wait for him to settle, uncover, try it again. Says, I remember this part. All right. So as you get it setting down on the ground, okay, next thing I want to do is introduce a little bit of motion, because some dogs are good once it's still, but the fact that it's moving is enticing for them to chase it. And if you're going to use a cue, this is often when I will introduce it, because up until now, you'll notice I haven't said anything to him. I haven't given him a cue to leave it alone. I haven't scolded him if he looked at it or if he were to move toward it. He's not restrained. He could leave. He could move. He could do whatever. Mostly he's just looking bored. Because I want these choices to be his. I want him to understand it and not me to nag him into doing it. So at this point, I introduce the cue. It's just going to be a matter-of-fact cue. I'm going to let the treat fall a little bit. Leave it. Yes. So it moved a wee bit, and he left it alone. So he gets rewarded. Leave it. Yes. Okay. And then you can make up the difficulty by varying how high you drop it, how close you drop it. Leave it. Yes. Seems a little more interesting to him when it moves. He is a very movement sensitive dog, so that doesn't surprise me. Leave it. And if it accidentally rolls really close to them, that's hard for them, so you may have some errors occur. If that's really challenging for your dog, you can move it further away from them. Leave it. Because usually by this time, they know the game. They've assumed some sort of stationary position for you because they understand the drill here. If you want to move it closer, you can reduce the challenge by taking out the movement and placing it closer. Yes. Yes. Now he had a little bit more obvious head turn away from that one. He's finding it a little harder to pass it up when it's right at the edge of his toe like that. All right. So now he's doing pretty well with the treats. Everybody playing view, the treats falling, things like that. But you'll notice he's been pretty much stationary the whole time. He's chosen to be in that down. And it's a good boy. That's fine. But just because he leaves the things alone while he's stationary doesn't mean he will leave them alone while he's moving. So I want to introduce the concept that he can move around but still leave things alone. So usually in class what I do is I have people encourage their dogs to get up. Yes. I was going to cheat. I had the food ready in my hand, didn't I? Let's go. Yes. There we go. So that the dog is moving, it's a little bit more tempting for them when they're moving to just make that little extra motion and snag it. So it gets them started in that pattern of still leaving it alone and moving. Sometimes I get people to put it on a surface, like the chair, just to simulate that coffee table height, because there's been the odd dog that even though they're good with it sitting out on the ground or being dropped on the ground, they're not so comfy with it when it's sitting on the chair. Just a different thing for them, so it's just something to generalize through. And you can start by games where sometimes they can have it and sometimes they can't. My guys have a cue that get it. is for them to chase the thrown treat. They're allowed to have it at that point. Get it? Yes. It also gets him moving, and as he comes back, he has to slow up and realize that he can't just run in and scarf that one off the ground. Get it? Catch? Yes. So I can ask him to move past it. Touch? Yes. That was a little challenging, hey buddy. Sit. Yes. And do some work around it. So for my dogs that are going to do things like rally obedience, where they have those distraction food bowls out, it's very helpful for them, okay, to learn that they can listen, think, and do things around the food instead of just grabbing the food. So it's something that I would work on at a more advanced level with them, their level of understanding. But hopefully you can see that this doesn't need to be a nagging or an intimidation type thing. My cues were not harsh. It was just simply, leave it. It's not for you. And I do use that out on walks. Leave it. Often I'll follow it by, let's go. So they get told, that's not for you. This is what we want to do instead. So it helps them realize, okay, that's not, but this is what we should do, and gives them a bit of information that way. So I hope that you found this a bit interesting and maybe a bit helpful for your work with your own puppy or dog. And thank you very much for watching. And thank you for being a good demo dog.